Welcome to Nifty 50 Photographers. I'm Richard Gill, I'm a professional photographer. Now, a question that I commonly get asked, particularly if I'm doing photo training with beginners, is how can I take a shot with a blurry background? And it's usually portraits that people are interested in. And the very quick answer is you need a wide aperture. But what a lot of people get confused by is the influence of focal length. So to get a blurry background, what you're trying to do is have a short depth of focus. We normally associate that with wide apertures. Now, if you don't understand what apertures are, then I'll link to a video up here somewhere that'll explain that to you. But first things, let's go outside and just take some shots, and I'll show you the influence of what focal length and aperture have, and it's the combination of the two that you need to get your head around. So let's head outside and see what we can do. I've set up a little typical portrait type shoot you might do. I've got a model, sorry, she's just a scarecrow. I haven't got anything more elaborate than that available. And we've got a background behind us, and I've moved the model away from the background about 2 meters. So we've got a bit of separation between the two. And I'm going to shoot it with 3 different focal lengths and show you the effect that focal length and aperture combined have on getting you this blurred background, because you need to understand the concept of both of them. So I'm going to start actually with a prime lens. It's a 35mm fixed focal length, and it has an aperture, its widest aperture is f2.8, so we'll start with f2.8. Now, if you've got a kit lens, you can probably get a similar focal length to this with it. You might not be able to get to f2.8. Your lens might limit you to something like f5.6, even f6.3, so it's going to give you a bigger depth of focus. So we'll take some shots at that as well so that you can see the difference. So here we go, f2.8. Right, we'll repeat that now at f5.6. And then finally I'll do one at f11. Now that should give us a really good depth of focus, really. It should get actually the background in focus and the model. Okay, so let's do the same exercise with a different focal length. Now here I've got a 70 to 200. Now typically for portraits you might use something around about 100mm, but let's start at 70 because that's probably the telephoto end of your kit lens. They'll often go to something similar to this. We'll do the same thing, so f2.8, f5.6 and f11. Now I'll do one final set at the other extreme of this lens at 200mm, just to demonstrate to you the effect that focal length has on the background. So now we've got a set of shots, 3 different focal lengths, 3 different apertures. Let's go and have a look inside and see what the difference is and how it's affecting our background. Back inside now, so I've got my selection of shots, 3 different focal lengths and 3 different apertures, and let's have a little review of them. So if I start with the wider angle lens, the 35mm focal length, and we'll start and take a look at one at f2.8, and you can see the background is still quite visible. It's not super sharp, but it's not as blurry as what we'd really like in a portrait shot, and that's even at f2.8. If you've got your kit lens and it only goes to 5.6 or something like that, then you're going to struggle. So how would you get round it if you wanted that kind of wide angle shot? Well, the only way really is to increase the distance between your subject and the background. So if we look at something right in the back of this photo, the second wall, you can see that that has got a little bit more blurry than the one before it, and it's probably about another 2 meters further back. So you really need to have quite a decent distance between your subject and the background if you're ever going to make that blurred. Let's go to a narrow aperture and see what the effect of that is. So here we are at f5.6, and you can see in this photo that actually the background has become sharper still. Really going to struggle to get what you want. Might be you've got to change something else other than the background distance. You're going to have to change your focal length. But just for sake of completeness, let's have a look at the shot at f11. So here you are at f11, and even that fence in the very background is pretty sharp because you've now got a very good depth of focus because you've got that narrow aperture. So let's have a look at the influence of focal length then. Let's start with the shots taken at 70mm. So here at 70mm, obviously our subject has come much closer because we've got a magnification effect of the telephoto lens. The wall is still fairly sharp. It's got more blur to it than the 35mm. Let me put the two side by side so you can see a comparison. There is more blur there, but probably not enough for the kind of portrait photo where you really want to take away anything distracting in the background. Let's look at f5.6. Now the background is starting to become sharper. In this case I can't really illustrate how much distance you'd need to put between your subject and the background because my photo is cropped in more and I can't show you the further background. But you get the general idea, things are going to get sharper. So it's not going to come any surprise to you when I show the shot taken at f11. And here it is at f11. We've pretty much got everything in the frame is still in focus. So let's go up to our final focal length. Here we are at 200mm, and now you can really see that the background has gone completely blurred, which is what you were trying to achieve with that photo. So 2 meter distance behind the subject, everything is completely out of focus. Let me illustrate how that stays out of focus even with quite narrow apertures. So there it is at f5.6, and you can see straight away the background is still very blurry. You can't really make out that it's a stone wall. Go to f11. Now it's starting to get into focus now, and you can see a little bit of the detail. But even at f11, it's not perfect. If you compare this shot to the one I took at f2.8 on the 35mm lens, you can see the background there is a little bit sharper than this one, even with a very narrow aperture. So that's the influence that aperture and focal length have together. So focal length plays a big part in this. Now, if you want to shoot portraits, typically portrait lenses are around about 100mm. You'll find a selection from sort of 90 up to 105. So if you're really struggling with your kit lens, then you might need to go out and buy yourself a portrait lens or get a wider zoom to your kit lens, something like 24 to 105, and that'll help you get those blurry backgrounds. I hope that's helped you get the understanding of how to combine focal length and aperture to get that nice blurred background and create those lovely portraits. So go out and practice, have some fun, and see if you can recreate them. And if you're looking what to do next, if you don't really understand this whole concept of aperture, focal length, I have a playlist which I'll link to up here that will explain to you all the basics of your camera, and go through that, and that will really help you understand what you're trying to do. I look forward to seeing you next time.